news?
Yeah, actually, I got I search like travel stipend to go to DC in March to like do basically it's a study on like self-efficacy for STEM students in engineering, and like how to get there, basically transition from HBCU. Guys, I'm excited.
Katie, you're freezing.
Katie, give it to me again because that sounded really
Slow
good.
down.
Okay. Yeah, I got basically like a travel grant, and they're gonna pay for me to go present like my study on like how to teach students to be self-efficacious as STEM students as they go from HBCU to PWI. So.
I think that sounds fantastic. Congratulations. Do you think we could have Ms. Campbell send you out the template to be a spotlight? We love to have some more. We'd love to share about your presentation.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations. You said you're going to do it in DC? You got to get some wings with some mambo sauce. I don't know if it's the same, but it used to be amazing. A little mambo sauce. Cool. Anybody else?
Good
morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Well, I was given an award recently from a company where I work, Embark Behavioral Health. They had their annual celebration, and I received Trusting Relationships Core Values Award. And so that was to represent one of the core values of the organization. So I couldn't believe it. I was in class when I got it, but it was great to receive.
I think this is amazing. I can't help but feel like these are opportunities to be showcasing this on our Instagram. Y'all are doing amazing things. I'm really excited for you. I'm hoping with both the presentation as well as the award, you add these to your CV, because that's all like nice opportunities to add to your CV as conversational points. If you don't share it, nobody's going to know. So don't feel that imposter syndrome as you all are approaching graduation. These are all amazing factors that you all can add to your CV and say, I hope you add that you're a CI scholar, because that's an amazing thing as well. And I want you to hopefully see the benefit and the value of that. So I think that's good. Anybody else got some amazing news?
Yes. Hi, y'all.
Hey.
If you guys hear my baby, she's with me this morning.
Okay.
But for an assignment with Dr. Ray, for school consultation, we had to create a community resource guide.
I love it.
And hold on, baby. In creating that community resource guide, the school social worker, the other school counselor, and all of the school counselors and the school therapists, they have been giving it out as a resource to parents.
This is amazing. Listen, in full transparency, I was just going to tell y'all I took a walk in Kennesaw last week because I didn't know if y'all had some amazing news. And I was just like, self-care. And y'all is just coming in here banging it out. I cannot be more excited. That's amazing stuff. Congratulations. Congratulations. There's nothing like making a resource manual that people actually use. So that's good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, again, I thank you all for showing up on this Saturday morning. And I think Ms. Campbell, she sent out the flyer that introduces Danielle Lynch. She actually is a CAU alum. So I always think it's nice when you can have someone that actually graduated from the same grounds that you all did. She is a practicing attorney, among several other things. And I'm going to turn the floor over to her. And she would love for you all to engage, ask questions, and participate. So there you go.
Good morning, everyone. I need y'all to talk back to me. So I'm not talking to myself. I do have a PowerPoint I'm going to pull up in a minute, but I just want to get a feel of who am I talking to? Like, who's in the room in the sense of what populations do you work with? What kind of work are you doing right now? And feel free to just take yourself off the mic and shout it out. I'm working with anybody that works with elderly populations, children, somebody working at Devereaux kind of thing. Who yeah.
Hi.
Nice.
Relax. Okay. Thanks.
I see light bubbles lighting up, but nobody's saying any. I don't know if I'm missing
And then we got to mute.
Bye.
Let me see. I'm muting Miss Jenkins. Was someone going to say something? Are we going to do a round robin?
Can y'all do a round robin? I don't want to call anybody's name out on this beautiful
I
Saturday.
was going to start actually. So
Thank
I work
you.
with children and adolescents
Okay.
and young adults as well at Embark Behavioral Health.
That's exciting. Okay, wonderful.
I
Well,
can go next. Good morning. My name is Chanel Smith. I'm currently completing my practicum with the Atlanta VA. I work with the geriatric veterans.
who else we got?
I'll go next. My name is Maya Carter. I'm interning at Renew Journey Counseling Services Office, and I am seeing children, adolescents, as well as young adults and older adults.
Love it.
Good morning. My name is Shaquilla Williams, and I'm interning at Hollis Innovation Academy, which is sorry,
That's
guys,
okay.
which is not very far from Clarkett, Atlanta. I did my practicum at pre-K, so I'll have to run the gamut of pre-K through 12 for my master's in school counseling for my internship experience.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I can go next. Sorry about earlier. My dog was having a field day. But my name is Brittany. I am currently an intern at Family Ties. So the population I want to work with primarily is couples and families. And right now I work with children in Fulton County schools.
Okay, wonderful.
Hi, my name is Katie Barber. I do community health with Georgia Hope, and so my clients range from 7 to 68. So,
wow, love that.
My name is Michelle Williams. I'm currently interning at NASMS, which is a service for gay Black men, hoping to expand that service. And my desire, of course, is to be a therapist.
Yes, wonderful. Anybody else?
Next. My name is Brianna Harrell, and I am interning at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, the Scottish Rite location, and I'm on the comprehensive inpatient rehab unit.
Wonderful. Okay. Wow.
My name is Rose Pratt, and I'm currently interning at Clayton Center, working with children and adolescents, providing school-based mental health services.
Okay.
I can go next. My name is Leilani Townsend, and I'm currently working at the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, working with victims of crimes.
Oh, I used to be a Fulton County solicitor, and we have a victims of crime unit, and I was a public defender as well. So yeah, in Fulton. Okay. Good. Who else we got?
Good morning. I am Christina Brantley. I'm a third-year school counseling student, and currently my internship is at Jean Charles Young Middle School in APS.
Did we pretty much get everybody? I feel like we didn't, and there's no pressure. If this is a morning where you're like, I really just want my mic off and my camera off, I'm not gonna actually call your name, but I want to give you a chance your voice to be heard if you want to share, or if there's something really interesting or new that you're doing that we haven't heard of yet. Anybody else?
Well, I'll go. Grand Risings, everyone. My name is Andrea Vines. My friend calls me Cookie. I'm in the 3-year program with the social work. I graduated in May, so excited about that. Just needed morning prep for myself. And I plan to acquire BT. So that's what I'm doing.
Yes, ma'am. Love it. Yes.
I'll introduce myself. My name is Deja Jones. I'm interning at the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Atlanta, and I work with the population from K through 12.
Good morning. I'm Tulani Leaks. I'm interning at Anchor Hospital. It's a psychiatric hospital. So I worked with adolescents and adults in the geriatric community so far.
We have you guys have a great group. It's a great variety. You're touching on so many different populations. And as you're probably learning, you're at Families First too, Cookie? Okay. As you're probably learning, so much of our clients' needs tend to overlap. and the work that you might do now at maybe Families First or with the school system or with, you know, Fulton County DA's office, the work that you're doing there, you'll be able to take on with you, and you'll continue almost like stacking as you go, stacking your experience, stacking your knowledge and the wealth of knowledge. And it's just going to continue to grow. And it's really exciting to see you all. And I'm definitely going to give you guys to keep talking. I'm just, I want you guys to keep shouting out that you can get a chance. I'm seeing the chat pop off right now. And I love it. But it's exciting to see so many colored faces in the field. And so that's why I'm like, what? This is exciting. And oh, yes, I've been in this quasi-legal role for 20 years. I know I look 18, but for 20 years. And so it's like, it wasn't always like this. So to see you guys doing what you're doing, it's so encouraging. And my heart is just overwhelmed knowing this. So who else wants to share just before we go on? Like, I'm not in a rush. I want to learn about who's in the room.
I'd like to say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bobby. No. Okay. Good morning. My name is Naya Parson Hudson. I am actually a doctoral student, but I'm an intern with the CICE program. It's a pleasure to see you today. And I understand the being in the quasi sort of field of social work and law. Pleasure to see you.
You as well.
Hi, I'm Bobby. I'm in the MSW program, a 3-year student as well. And I intern at the Atlanta VA. I work with homeless veterans. Yes.
Oh, y'all, my heart's so full. Awesome. Anybody that we missed that wants to make sure that, you know, their organization or their agency or population is shouted out?
Good morning. My name is Khadijah Martin. I'm an intern at Georgia Regional Hospital, and I work in the forensics department with individuals that's incompetent to stand trial.
Yes, ma'am. That is interesting. Wow. That's super interesting. Okay. I love it. So I'm going to feel free to stop me. Feel free to talk while, you know, because I'm not going to be monitoring the chat. I know Kenya and Ms. Campbell will, but feel free to just jump out. It's more conversational. I have the slides, I have the things, I'm going to be talking, but you guys can absolutely jump in and say, hey, I experienced this, or hey, what about this? Or have you experienced this? It's more of a conversation. I like to bring theory and life together when I present and when I teach. So, and we learn from each other. So this is definitely more of a conversation. So I'm about to pull up my screen, but anybody, I'm believing in letting people be heard. I don't want to, you got like 3 more seconds to tell me who you are and let your voice be heard. Everybody feels heard? Okay, awesome sauce. All right.
Let me just jump in real quick. If you can possibly turn your cameras on, just because we don't want our guests to be talking to blank screens, and we want to get some good screenshots and see all of you guys' beautiful smiling faces this morning. Remember, this is a job, and there are opportunities that could arrive, but by you know, you being fully engaged. So if you can, please turn those cameras on. And if you can't, shoot me a message and I'll understand, but we do want to make sure we're being respectful to our guests, okay?
Ms. Campbell, I only have one person that has indicated that they will not be on camera.
Yes, she messaged me, so we're good there. But
I love it.
Everyone else, please, this is, you know, really important to be respectful and stay engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. All right, now let's get to sharing the screen. I told everyone beforehand, I'm not techies, and I use Teams everywhere else. So we're on Zoom. So give me 1 second, y'all. while I get my life together. I think that's the right one. We did a practice run. Okay, Kenya, what you see?
I see it. You just
do,
want
you
to hit
see,
your,
do you see the next slide or no? Okay.
No, I see your main
Sorry.
slide, but you just want to hit from beginning.
Okay. And now we're only seeing, okay, perfect.
There
So
we go. And then go back.
go back.
Yeah, I think you want to show your
Yeah.
slide. Yep, there you go.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Little gallery. I want to see the people in the faces. Can y'all? Okay, wonderful. All
Can
right.
you see them on the side?
Yep, I can.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so just a little bit about me. As Kenya shared and as you read in the bio, I am a human services public interest attorney by trade. Been practicing since 2004, graduated from Clark Atlanta in 2001, graduated from UGA Law in 2004. I wanted the balance of the experience of HBCU and PWI. And I wanted that in my resume, but I also wanted it for myself. I grew up in Atlanta, so all I see is us and I love us. But I also know the work that I do, I needed to learn how to work well with other populations. And so that was why I intentionally exposed myself there. Public defense, public defender in Fulton County, solicitor, prosecutor in Fulton County. Much of my career was a child advocate attorney doing DFACS work. I was the child's lawyer. So you're going to see in some of my examples and stuff, there's going to be some of that might come out. That is my favorite job. I've worked with the elderly population. I've worked with veterans. I've worked with the homeless populations. I've done legal aid, disability. I've had many jobs, and I've worked with many populations, but children are my jam. The littles are my jam, kids are my jam. And so I'm really passionate about that. So I was excited to hear so many of you guys in that field as well. But one thing that I have noticed that I want to kind of jump into, oh, and Kenya wanted me to tell y'all my other side. I'm a yoga teacher. So I am Jamaican. My father is Jamaican and Trini. So it runs in my blood that I have about 5 jobs. A great work ethic. But I teach yoga on the side, and the yoga came, and we're going to talk about self-care later, but the yoga came, as I was experiencing burnout in the way that I was allowing life and work to sort of impact me, and I needed to find it out. And so we're going to talk about the importance of that. And I'm sure some of what I'm sharing is going to overlap and things that you've learned. So I ask you to oblige me and to also feel free to jump in and share what you've learned on some of these topics so that we can just have a conversation about it. But I'm trying to give it to you a little bit from just a legal, different perspective. So let's get into it. All right, so my first plea to you, and I don't think that I necessarily have to make the plea from hearing about who's in the room, is when I got into the field, most of my, I'm a Delta too, ooh, Sigma Shafter, okay. But most of my line sisters, sorors, big, like we were all in helping professions, so many of us, right? Helping professions, it could be medical, it could be social work, human services, some sort of therapist, counseling, educator. You're in a helping profession, and we were in helping professions, but many of them were going into traditional roles. So you were going to be a school social worker, you wanted to be a counselor for an agency, or like a family therapist, right? And it wasn't until I started diving into my career as a human services attorney that I was able to see how much we needed them in the legal profession. So I loved hearing that one of you is already working with the DA's office, right? But keep your options open as you're growing, as you're graduating, as you're shifting, changing careers, changing vocations. There's such a broad spectrum, and as the world continues to grow and as it seems to worsen in some ways, we will need helping professionals more and more. In so many different areas and so many different fields. So my plea to y'all is to continue to be open and expand in if you don't see the job created with your skills and with your skill set. My social workers, they get out there and they talk to my kids and they talk to my clients. The social workers have kept cheap people out of jail because they've been able to articulate to me things I don't know. I'm quasi-legal. I know what the DSM is, but I don't really know enough to talk about it, you know? And so I know what the spectrum is. I know certain things, but I can't really dive in. So my social workers are who I would put on the stand, or my social workers are who I would get to talk to the judge, my therapists, my counselors, those professionals, and they would come in and they would be able to effectuate change in a way that could really not just impact the family we're working with, but shift the judge's perspective in general on the cases that they were hearing. Teach them about domestic violence cases and teach them about why this woman doesn't want to keeps having him arrested and then keeps not wanting to prosecute. And him thinking it must not be real. Well, let me tell you about the dynamics of a DV case. My social worker is going to educate you, judge. Right. And so that's how you guys can sort of step in different fields as well, particularly in the legal field. My professional plea to you is to get in there if y'all aren't in there, to consider it, because we need your help tremendously with our veterans that are homeless, that are getting arrested for trespassing continuously, and there's a lack of support. Jails are stacked. We need y'all's help. So that's my plea right at the top before we do anything. All right, so this is the little agenda that we have. We're going to talk about ethics in the helping profession. We're going to talk about consequences of unethical behavior, confidentiality, documentation, some legal implications that you'll face, legal things that you'll face in the field, biases in reporting. Most of y'all are mandated, most of y'all are mandated reporters. Biases in reporting. Challenges, personal challenges that come up with reporting and the work that we do. Like just what you deal with internally, knowing that I have to report this, but I know a little bit about the family and I know the intentions and I'm hoping it's not true. And I know what's going to happen when I report it, or I don't trust my boss at all and she don't get it, but I kind of get it. But once I tell her, she gonna run with it, and this could impact this could impact the whole family. This could change the whole situation, right? Some of that stuff, that turmoil that you might deal with as an individual. The value of self-awareness and development in the work we do. And then burnout and self-care. I'm so passionate about this work we do, y'all. We deal with vulnerable populations and they depend on us even when they don't want to, even when they walk up to us and say, oh, you just another caseworker, or I know you don't care. Or my last caseworker, what makes you different? Or the teenager just sits across from you and doesn't answer, right? We still want to show up and give them our best, and they deserve it. All right, so I'm here. I'm trying to just switch my screen so I can see y'all a little better. Make that a little smaller. Okay. All right, so ethics in the helping profession. So we're studying this. It's an examination of how we do things, right? There's all these ethical theories. I teach at Rasmussen. I tell you, got many jobs. I teach at Rasmussen's College. I'm a SME, and I design courses there too. One of them is ethics in the globe, and one is ethics in social work, and human services, excuse me. And so there's theories in ethics, and I encourage you, if you have never taken an ethics course, to actually take them, particularly when it comes to your field, but just in general, if you have access or ability to do that. But ethics shows up every day in our life in a way that outside of just theories and the rules, the standards we're supposed to abide by. Ethics show up in whether or not we're gonna flip the bird at the person who just, cut us off in traffic, right? Ethics show up in whether or not we decide to give the homeless person money that's on the side of the road. And we're sitting there and we see the change, but we see them and we don't have our mask on, and it's not, there's no judgment in these conversations. And what I'm saying, it's just how you decide what is right and what is wrong, how I want to show up, how other people show up. And if you think about, so my next question for you is, what do you think of? Because I want y'all to engage. When you think about what ethics is and why it's so important in this profession, in the helping professions, like what comes up for you guys?
I feel like ethics has to do with what are your morals, what align with what you believe like the world should be.
Yeah. And how do you, go ahead, I'm sorry, was someone else talking?
I was going to say, particularly when I came to school for social work, the title of social work to me carried a negative connotation simply because of the way some social workers showed up to situations. Obviously overworked, tired, underpaid. And so I know we're changing the narrative surrounding that, but a lot of people still have that. So I think it's important, and when you get into the self-care, that we reiterate that, because, you know, if we're going to change this narrative, then we have to be cognizant of how we show up.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. And one thing too, we have to be cognitive. And so that's what we're working on. And I'm loving that we're having these conversations, because they weren't conversations before. They have been in the field for 20 years. They were not conversations before. And it's necessary because the same token, we're humans. And I've not said it, of course, I would never say it to my clients. I might have said it to my teenagers, but I've never say it to my clients, because they need the reality check sometimes. I'm doing my best, ma'am. When I teach yoga, I've said it in the studio before, like, y'all, I just coming out of traffic, again, I'm a whole human in this piece, and I'm showing up as my best self. So give me some grace. We should give ourselves grace with the burnout, where I don't want to jump too far ahead, but we need to be able to do that self-care to give ourselves grace, to recognize we're receiving a lot. We're receiving a lot. And so we're only human. And at some point, if we don't address it, it's going to start spilling over in ways that we don't want it to, right? Right. Excellent point. And so a lot of people don't think about that when they think about ethics. So I like that you made that point. Anyone else want to talk about maybe why ethics is important to study, particularly in a helping profession or in social work and human services? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, my apologies. I was gonna say, for me, in my experience, something that stuck out was dignity and worth. So being mindful that when someone comes to you, that's a very vulnerable space, a vulnerable state that they're coming to you in. So you have to be very cognizant in creating a safe space for them. Also being able to navigate that conversation with limits of confidentiality and mandated reporting, but also letting them know that they can, open up and share that information. For me, that's been my biggest light bulb moment, being mindful that, yes, you're coming to me in a vulnerable state, but I'm here to support you. I still believe in you. And then treating them with that dignity and worth, so they can so we as a whole can try to change the stigma around seeking services. So that's been my biggest thing with ethics.
I love this. Yeah. No, you're right. It's not about us. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's their life. And I saw a hand raised and then it went down, so I want you to bring it back. I don't know if it's still raised. Okay. Shaquala, did I say it right? Okay.
It's Shaquilla,
okay.
But I go by Shaq all the time in professional environments. I was gonna say I view ethics as kind of like a moral compass, as you would say. And I also put ethics in tandem with empathy.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I feel like Brene Brown is one of my favorites. And she has a video where she says, like, sympathy is like looking down in the tunnel and at someone and being like, hey, are you okay? And empathy is getting down in the tunnel with someone and asking them like, hey, are you okay? Tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And that is a visual representation for me of what we do for ethics, because as social workers or, you know, school counselors or counselors or therapists, it's us getting in the tunnel and working with our clients and saying, what do you need? How can I help you? And using ethics as a moral compass in the back of our mind to say what's right and what's wrong. Or how would, another way with empathy, how would you feel if you were on the other side of this?
Yeah. No, excellent point. Chanel, am I saying it right?
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback off of what Shakula just said. I feel like because of our profession, ethics translates to other parts of our lives. And it's kind of like when you know better, you do better. So we need to implement things that we learn as professionals in our personal lives as well. So it's not just something we do on the clock. I feel like we're in one of those fields, like in the human services and helping profession. It's not just on the clock for us, it's like a lifestyle thing. And I feel like ethics heavily influences our lives, and that trickles into like our boundaries, that trickles into how we carry ourselves, trickles into social media and how we present ourselves. So I think it influences us as a whole and not just as a professional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I say it in yoga and I say it in the courtroom because I've been a manager as well in my one of my many lives of attorneys, and how we show up in when I'm managing and training younger attorneys in particular. I would have to explain that to them, like how you show up on the yoga mat is how you show up in life. How you show up in the courtroom is how you show up in life. How you show up with your client is how you show up in life. So just pay attention to yourself. Are you easily irritated? Are you know what I mean? What's going on with you? Are you know what I mean? Just noticing how you're showing up and noticing the boundaries that you're creating with your clients, how the boundaries you're creating with your family members. It's your triggers, all these things. You're bringing you everywhere. So we need to be mindful of how we present and how we show up. The bottom line for me is and it's been consistent. These people deserve our best. And so we got to do what we can to give them that. You guys hit on some excellent points in there. So forgive me, because I'm going to go with the flow a little bit. So we're going to talk about things in the slides. My slides are going to be out of order because I want to be authentic and let things flow as they need to. So we will jump around, and then, so, you know, give me grace if we get to the last slide and you were like, we talked about that. I'm like, I know we did, but y'all went ahead because y'all are so, you know, on top of things, and that's great. One point, somebody said something. Oh, you talked about, I don't know who it was. It might have been you, Shaq. Somebody talked about something came up for me where I wanted to be clear too. One thing we need to keep in mind is, yes, we're the professionals, but this is their life. So many times we have it at the forefront of our brain. I know the answer. These are the standards. These are the policies. This is what I'm supposed to do. I've done this before. The longer we've been in the work, and that'll get you every time. I've had cases like these before. I've done this before. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been doing this for 5 years. And you might hear from your supervisor. You ain't work with this person. So you need to give them the same amount of space and time that you've given everyone else when you started. Everyone is different. Everyone on this call is different, even though you're all doing the same profession and you have similar passions, and we're all different. So how dare I approach each of you like you all one and the same? And we shouldn't do that with our clients, right? That's something we need to be mindful about. When I say take the you out of it, and someone mentioned that, and that's why I wanted to sit with it just a little bit, taking the ego out. And it's going to show up. It's a part of who we all are. But you guys, y'all either have or are getting PhDs, and master's degrees. Y'all got licenses. Y'all been in this field work, and y'all know a lot. But you don't know what Tasha's dealing with at home right now. You know what her case file says. but you don't know what she's dealing with and why she's doing it. So let me pause and let her speak and really listen and put all I know on the back burner for a little bit and give her space. That's what somebody said. Give them space because it's their life. Yeah, thank you guys so much. And I'm loving the conversation. So let's keep it going. But for me, ethics is so important in the helping profession too, because Cookie, I think you might have said it. We have, and forgive me if it wasn't Cookie, we have there's a stigma almost about workers, government workers, agency workers, that we don't really care. We just trying to get a check. This work is hard, y'all. This work can get you. If I'm still doing it, I must care. Like, and the check's not as big as you think, ma'am, is what I wanted to tell people sometimes. I don't know what you think I'm making, but I'm doing this because I care. But that is because of bad workers, burnt out workers, you know what I mean? Things like that. And the news, the media and things that come out. And so we want to make sure we also, the standards are important because even though we're one person showing up, we're representing everything. And so that's why it's important too. And we're a lot of times with these people, these populations are people that we're dealing with. We're their last source of help. You know, maybe everyone else has turned their back on them, so they deserve everything we can give them. So let's talk about some of the consequences, right, of unethical behavior in our field. And again, feel free to just jump in, take yourself off mic. You can say, excuse me, you know, like I'm totally fine with it. Because I may not see your hand and I don't want to move past what you have to say. But of course, you know, there's liability, and I'm gonna talk about it on some other slides. But there's civil liability, there's criminal charges, right? Civil liability is where you hear, and you see the article, agency got sued. They have to pay out this amount of money. Someone's license is taken away, you know, things like that. Like civil liability, you're not getting locked up, but everything you work for might be gone. You know, your professional reputation might be gone because even if you win the case, you the one that had the trial. I saw you on the news. Like, is your client really going? Even if you won it, your client didn't read the article where the judge said what you did was okay, but they did see your face on the news what you were accused of doing, right? So that's your professional reputation. So it's like those things all come when, you know, can come with having a civil case against you. So there are all these ethical standards that apply for each of us in different ways. For me as an attorney, it is the bar. You know, my ethical standards are very different from y'all in some ways. For some, if you have, you know, your licensed attorney, there's a human services standards, there's social work standards. But they all have a lot of similarities as well. So they're not laws, as you guys are probably aware of. There are laws that we need to pay attention to, but the ethical standards are not, but they do give us some guidance, and they really do help. So it's important to pay attention to those. So we've got civil liability, we've got the criminal charges, right? I just heard of a case where I don't think anyone on the call said they worked at Devereaux, but there was a therapist at Devereaux was arrested for having sex or having sexual interaction and having sex via FaceTime video with a former client, the 16-year-old client. And so, yeah, I mean, clearly, like there's all kind of things wrong with that, right? But that's an example of how that arrest came. And she's not been charged guilty, former public defender here. Clients lie. People are not honest on all fronts, you know. There could be something inaccurate about this, but it could have happened too, because former prosecutor, people are bad. Some people they're bad people out there too. So like it could go either way, but again, that is a risk in this field. Outside of the fact that, you know, this was a minor, the risk there's that added risk of going to jail if we don't abide by the laws and the ethical standards and things like that. in our practice and the decisions that we make. So it's important to pay attention to that. Suspension or termination from work. Not paying attention to just abiding by ethical practices. I've had a colleague that thought she was doing the best, making the best choices by putting so much, she put so much on the front end of her work with the client facing side, seeing the clients, talking with them, building relationships. Our caseloads were like over 90 at this point. But we had a duty to document, and I'm gonna talk about documentation on the other side, but it was an internal policy. But we were also under Kenny A. I was with DeKalb County. If you work with kids or whatever in any kind of way, DFACS or any of that, you might be familiar with Kenny A, but we were under Kenny A actively at that time. A lawsuit based on a child dying that just changed the whole system, the way we do it in DeKalb and Fulton, in a good way. But we were under Kenny A, and so we had to keep documentation. And her failure to document something impacted a case, not in a way that caused damage to the child, but in a way that we weren't able to find an answer to a question quick enough. And what the concern that my director found was that in the end, this could have been more serious. So she went on 2 weeks pay without 2 weeks suspension without pay. Documentation is part of the ethical standards, right? So that's why I bring that up. It's not necessarily, a lot of times when you think of ethics, again, you're thinking of the worker sleeping with the former client or the worker sleeping with the parent or something, all, fantastical kind of thing. It's not always like that. Sometimes it's as simple as you didn't document this. And so 2 weeks is a big deal because again, we're not out here making, stock market money, stock New York stock dollars. Like we're not doing this work for the money. We're doing it because we love it. And so 2 weeks pay hits anybody, but especially if you're a government worker or agency worker. So you want to try to avoid that, or you want to avoid termination, because then how you going to explain that when you show up for the next job? So loss of pay, demotion, I've seen that. Loss of professional credentials. I know I worked hard for my license. I studied hard, I worked hard, I cried hard, I prayed hard, and I don't want that going away for no reason whatsoever, and y'all don't either. Especially because of one decision or series of decisions that you made. And the people on this call, my assumption is, and my honest assumption is most people in this field, my hope is that at least 98% of us want to do work and want to make the right decisions. So when these ethical decisions are made in a way that has these consequences, it's usually not because we're bad. My hope is, maybe I'm naive by believing that, most of us, it's usually because we didn't think things through, or we saw things through a biased lens. Or, we thought we could help and nobody would notice if I did this, something like that. But then there's reasons these rules and things are in place to protect us. We're burnt out, things like that. So you want to make sure you maintain your professional credentials. There's the reputation. The world is small. And the internet is making it smaller. All it takes is one person to put a story about you or one clip. They didn't post the whole video of what you said, but the clip of what you said, and it's a wrap. Like judge, jury, forget all that. Like it's done. Like you're done. And so you want your professional reputation. It has always been important, but I feel like now more than ever, because before people even go to court, people are going to the internet. And you don't want to be the caseworker that took my kids and wrongly and all this other stuff because somebody is making a really great video about what you did and it's not accurate and you don't have the documentation or anything to support your side of why you did what you did. So your professional reputation is on the line. Of course, our decisions can cause harm to our clients, and we didn't get into this work to cause harm. Could cause harm to the agency. The agency could lose funding. People may not want to work. Go ahead, Kenya.
So I wanted to know if you could kind of elaborate on like that social media aspect, because I don't know. I'm still trying to find a niche with it. And I think you do a little bit better with it because I tend to not post as much as I would like to. And so it's like, how do you find the balance of still like being yourself? Like, do you have two different accounts or do you? Because I feel like I err on the side of caution, but then I've got all these photos and good times that it's like, because I do feel like you could just pull something from out of context. You know what I mean? So it's like one picture too many with a drink. And it's like, oh, you know, like you said, who is this person? But like, we're still people. So I'm always kind of curious about, you know, how you decide what you post or, you know, do you wait or, you know, what's your thoughts around stuff like that?
I would love to hear y'all's thoughts too as well when I finish. So it's something I still gauge as well. So I have 2 accounts, and I don't think my government name is on any account.
Okay.
And some of that though started less with the reputation and how I'd be perceived side. It was more safety. I was a public defender. So when I hear people to this day say, "How you doing, Miss Danielle?" Who is that? Is it, and I was felonies. So I'm talking about murder, child molestation, like the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah.
So when and I was cool with most of them, but still, you know, you get a little nervous. Hey, Miss Danielle, like, you know, were we good? Did I take your kids? Because I did defects work too. Are you happy to see me? So that's where it started. So I wouldn't recommend if for your personal stuff, using your government professional name on your profile, being easily identifiable, and that's for safety reasons, but I think that's the work we all do in all honesty. Mental health is real. You don't want to become the focus of someone that is dealing with something, and you know what I mean? And so that's one way. I also, for me personally, because I can only answer from the personal side, but and you're asking because I have a yoga page and then I have a personal page. So I on my personal page is very small. I might have like friends. And so that's one way I do it too. So the ones with the drinks or anything like that, that's the people that I want to share with. Like that stuff doesn't go on the public because it's not for the public, and I'm very cautious about it. And it's with people that I trust not to repost. But it's something, I think it's a challenge. I mean, does anyone else want to weigh in on, and we're all adults, and how you're able to balance, because you guys are in the field, you're getting your degrees. You have them.
Can I
ask
a question? I'm sorry.
Oh, what were you gonna say? You were gonna say something, Andrea? Because I'm like, is it age? Do you think that's part of, like, do you not have the same thoughts? Because I'm curious about your thoughts. So I'm glad you raised your hand.
My biggest thing is balance. So balancing out, long as you have enough enriching content to balance out your fun, light, and playful content. That's how my rule of thumb. So, and I also do have I have 2 separate pages. One is private, one is public. Now my business page, that is the Cookie name. So I have created a name for my business that I plan to do that with. But my biggest, but that's my niche. My niche is balance. But work-life balance. So that's kind of how I made it an easy rule of thumb of, you're going to see some things on here that are personal, but it ain't going to be too much in my business. But there are going to be way more enriching things around my life. And then also, I know I post for the girls, so the hair, the makeup, the things like that kind of throw you off. But it's always going to be some type of enriching underbelly to whatever I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought someone else had.
I could share. I was going to say something. I would say, like, for myself, when it comes to social media and me like working with victims of crimes and stuff, and I know how easy it is, I have to tell them like my public name when I am introducing myself. So I would, depending on the social media account. So like my Instagram is like just for my college friends. So nobody really has access to like my Instagram account unless we went to school together. And that account is typically private. And I also only have like my first name up there. I don't have my last name. And sometimes I have my middle name because my middle name is Lee, but they don't think to spell it the way my mom spelled it is Leigh. People think to spell it Lee. So when it comes to like my Facebook account, that's more like if my coworkers want to find me, or if professionals, whenever it's time for me to go apply for my career, family stuff, because I'm more like under control on Facebook rather than I am on Instagram, because I know like I'm still young, so I want to have fun with my friends. So the things that I do on Instagram, it won't be shown on social media. I mean, on Facebook. But I have another friend. He works in like Emory and does a lot of stuff with their research department, and his Instagram does not have his real name on it. So it has his nickname on it. And he said that it's just the balance, like Andrea was saying, it's the balance between the two. He don't want his coworkers to find him on social media, on Instagram, but he would prefer them to find him on Facebook because it's more professional. And also he uses LinkedIn too. And he was like, they can find me on LinkedIn whenever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, great point. But that leads to the other ethical dilemma, especially those of you dealing with teens or working with teens. I've had teenage clients in particular ask for my social media. I mean, I've had adults, but I think adults get it more when I'm like, I'm not on it, or I ain't giving you that. Because I show up as myself. I am. But my teens, that when they say, that's how teens communicate with each other. You know what I mean? They don't even ask for phone numbers anymore. Like they'll, what's your IG, right? So maybe even having a separate page just for clients, or just managing, being able to set that boundary and say no. But that comes up too. Oh, Brittany, go ahead.
Sorry, just to jump in. One thing I like also helpful, because when I first started, I was seeing a lot of teenagers and adults, but like teenagers. So at my agency, we're like, they have access to our phone numbers. So, you can find people's phone numbers through your accounts and things like that. So one thing I also like, just as an extra precaution, because I also too, like, I'll tell them like, that may not be appropriate, or like, I can't give you my social media. So they'll try to find it through the phone number. So I've also stopped giving clients my actual phone number. So I have a Google phone number that I so that way, like, if you want to find me, I can direct you to the avenue that's best, because instead of you like accidentally finding me yourself, or like it popping up or something like that. So that can help too.
No, I think that's an excellent idea.
I love it. Those are both great tips.
Yeah, that's a lot
about an age restriction. And then I love the IG, because if I'm hearing you right, with the Google account, you'll know that this isn't somebody calling from your direct number, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I have a Google account too. Yeah, the Google Voice. And it tells you if it's a Google Voice call, you have a voice message, like it's a whole different area. I'm glad that was a great point that you brought that up, especially with you guys having to give your number to clients, Brittany. That's a great way to do it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kenya. Definitely. So just so we talked about, professional reputation. We talked about how our behaviors or decisions can bring harm to the client where we think we're helping them, and maybe we might be hurting them in the interim. We thought we were doing the right thing, right? Harm to the agency and profession. I think it was Cookie that brought up the fact that our reputation is paramount, not just to us, but I don't care if you stop seeing me. I need you to see somebody. It's not about me. But if I give you, so you cannot gel well with me as an attorney, as a professional, as a whatever, however I'm showing up, right? But I want you to get the help. And so being mindful of how I present, so that it is not in a way, whatever this conflict is, it's not with the system. It's not with counselors. I don't want to see a therapist. You don't want to leave anyone with the feeling of, I don't want to see therapists anymore because they don't care. I don't want to see caseworkers anymore because they don't care. And so how we show up, we're one, we represent everybody. We may not intend to, so we have to remember that. Elizabeth, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, real quick before we transition over, thinking about these consequences made me think of the case of Gabriel Fernandez, who was like 8 years old and he passed away from abuse. And it kind of brought to light kind of the efforts from Department of Family and Child Services and how a lot of the social workers were overworked and overwhelmed with the cases that they had. Because in that case, social workers were actually put on trial and they were investigated and they were going to be charged if they, discovered anything partially for the death of the young child. So, and it brought to light a lot of different things, and it brought change because eventually they ended up dropping the charges for the social workers. But as I was looking through everything and as we discussed, it just made me think of that, of how, even when working with Department of Family and Child Services, how, unfortunately it took a case that severe for them to, recognize that, sometimes when it comes to the field, you can do your best personally, but if you're someone who's literally overworked and have so many cases, how it can have that damaging effect. So when we're talking about ethics and things of that nature, sometimes you can do everything ethically right, but there's some things that may fall through the cracks because of the organization that you work with or because of the nature of wherever you're at that given point in time. But it's really tricky. And watching the documentary on that case, it just made me, I don't want to say fearful, but it just brought to light how you have to be very careful in this field because you could very easily get swept up in a case like that.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And that's I mean, you made so many excellent points, and I'm glad that you shared that example because I don't know how long some of you guys have been in the work and in Kenya, I don't know, if you could speak to it, but I know as a public defender, my caseloads were about 140, 160. And I know in DeKalb, and I was in DeKalb, that's when I was child advocate attorney for 11 years in that particular role. And my caseload never got under 85. And that was a good day. Listen, and I say day because I think it went back up, but on average it was 102. And so there was about 11 or 12 attorneys in my office. So that's how many kids were in care in DeKalb, just to let you know that everybody had caseloads like that. And when you have caseloads that, and I see you, Cookie, so I'm gonna definitely, I see your hand is up. But when you have the caseloads like that, it is challenging, Elizabeth. That's the reality of it. You want to give your best work and attention, and you want to manage your home life. And God forbid you working on your master's degree at the same time when you're working at night, right? And so there are changes being made in the system. Agencies are being made more aware of. We're talking about self-care more. Money is a challenge. Funding is a challenge. So we need more workers so we can spread these cases out. You know what I mean? And the turnover is so high that when people keep quitting now, you add more cases. In my case, that's what it looks like, right? It can look like that sometimes. Being vocal. If you can tell from this call, I'm vocal. My boss used to be like, you just come in here and say what you're going to do. Like, you don't ask. Like, that's just how I show up. But being vocal about what you can manage in a respectful way. Like, but if you're talking with your manager, documenting these conversations where you said, I have a lot on my plate right now, things like that. So if God forbid you're in that situation, you got the emails to show. I kept asking them to take things off my plate because I was doing double cases. That kind of thing. Those are ways we can try to protect ourselves in this. And then not being afraid to walk away from jobs that don't fit you anymore. It's not the career, but maybe it's the agency. You know what I mean? Or step away or take a vacation or something like that. But you make some great points because like we said, these people didn't get into this work. Those people didn't get into this work to hurt kids. They didn't get into this work to have to go through that. They wanted to do good work. Ooh, Cookie was up. Somebody's hand was up. And I said, I see you. And then I kept talking.
Yes.
Okay.
So all I was gonna say was piggyback off what Lizzie said. Just I felt like social work needs, or really just all clinicians need some type of support or a checks and balances for these type of things. I recently got a CPR certified due to my serving for AmeriCorps, and they said that you're never supposed to give someone, it's really dangerous to give someone CPR by yourself, because if you get tired, now you put yourself in danger, and now you can no longer help the person. And when he was saying that in the training, my mind went to social work. If I'm out here serving clients by myself and I have a caseload of 140 and I'm the only person assigned to that caseload, there's bound to be someone that falls through the cracks, because I'm only human. So being mindful that we know that walking in, we know that when we're eager and enthusiastic at the beginning of our journey, so we definitely should have things or be fighting for things to get some type of support during that way. I don't know if that could be another way to get your hours, or another way to work in the field to get experience before, but being able to support those clinicians that are overwhelmed, because if we continue to overwhelm them, if we continue to all burn out, that's also going to bring harm to the client. That's going to bring harm to agencies and organizations in the profession at whole. So that's just what I thought about.
No, great. Thank you for sharing. I definitely agree. Shaq, you got your hand raised.
Yes, I'm sorry. My baby was a little fussy and I was feeding her, so I turned my camera off. But I wanted to talk about this because I worked at DFACS for a while as well. Even though I'm school counseling, I definitely I work at a homeless shelter as well. But working at DFACS, my caseload was extremely high, and I was cross-trained in foster care and investigations, right? So
you were really working.
yeah. So my mix, yeah. So I would go from investigations, but I also had a foster care caseload because there were so many kids coming into care that we just couldn't keep up with it, with the amount of workers. I had to leave because I was pregnant at the time and burnout just got too high. One day I worked from like 7 a.m. to like 7 p.m. and my feet were like triple the size that they were when I started. And my husband was like, he was my fiance at the time. He was like, yeah, no, you gotta go. But it was, for me, it was hard for me because it felt unethical, because I have a caseload of 45 to 50 clients that it fluctuated in foster care. Investigations is way crazier. But how can I effectively see them once a month and really get to know them and give them the things that they need and schedule doctor's appointments and talk to their foster families and make sure visits are happening with their regular families, with all of, and document in shines and meet with the school social worker. So it was just so many different facets that played a part of it that it was kind of hard. So I was like, you know what, I have to go because I'm being pulled apart and I'm being reprimanded, but I'm like, I'm not able to be effective. Even with investigations, we have a 24, a 48, or a 72. I'm pushing back the 72s to immediately get to the 24s, but now I'm rushing the 72s, and a proper investigation isn't being handled the way I think it should be. So yeah, this was the perfect conversation.
Yeah, no, and I want to say, so thank you for sharing. Thank you for your work. Like, I feel like with DFACS, with all of you guys, thank you for your work, not just DFACS workers, right? Because you guys, we're working on the front lines and like of people with trauma. So thank you for your work, everyone on the call. DFACS, we need workers. So anybody, I don't want anybody that was thinking about one day working for DFACS, but what she's saying is true. That it can get like that, but that's why it's important to pay attention, to be vocal, to communicate and to document. And there are, depending on the county you're in particular, there are changes and laws in place. It's important to know that, to say to your supervisor and your supervisor if you need to. Well, my caseload is not supposed to be this high. Things like that. So find advocates to advocate for you in that space as well, because I walked away from my favorite, being a child advocate. I went to law school to be a lawyer for kids, and I walked away. And I'll talk about it. Well, I can talk about it now. I was gonna talk about it on the burnout side, but that's the last one, and I don't know if we'll have time, but it impacted my health. Like literally it impacted my health. Had a doctor say you have a tumor in your spine. It wasn't that, but I could barely walk for a while, whatever, that when it trying to figure out, it was all stress related. And what I knew is that I was going to sleep, waking up thinking about praying. I pray about my clients, but I was going to sleep, waking up thinking about my clients, what the judge is going to do. Is he going to send a baby home? Is the case manager going to have everything they're going to, am I need to cuss this case manager out again? Am I going to have to go off on this case manager? All these things, right? Is the parent's attorney going to be shady? Is this going to be done in time? They going to want this child to go home, and it's all on you because the kid is 5 and you feeling like it's all on me, but you also got 100 and some other kids or 45 other kids. You've got all these clients to see and all these deadlines by law, 72 hours, 24 hours, but you need to spend a little more time, but then you've got 30 other cases and the foster parents are calling you telling, girl, I know. You got to talk to, you got to communicate, and we've got to take care of yourself. So kudos for stepping back when you knew you couldn't do it anymore. But there are ways to try to continue to do the work and efforts in place to make it a little easier for us as workers. But when we don't have it anymore, we got to step back. So, I mean, that's what you had to do. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to talk about confidentiality, but not give you this case study because I think I didn't know y'all where you guys were at with experience. And I feel like this is probably like an easy breezy one for y'all. So confidentiality, you guys know what it means. I want to talk about the value of it with regard to ethics in the work that we do, and just some of the challenges that we have when we're dealing with confidentiality. If a client shares something with you, if we have the mandated reporter, we'll go through that later. But like in this particular example, there's a teenage client that's like, saying, disclosing something to their therapist, and the parents want to know what the client says, and then the therapist is called to court to share some things. They want to know how the client is doing, right? And I just want to talk about some of the things that you guys in your role, because I got attorney-client privilege, so I can't share confidences. I'm not even a mandated reporter as a child advocate attorney. So if my client said, I want to go back home, but my uncle was used to molest me and you can't tell nobody, I'd have to give all the hints that I could, that why she wants to go home. So I'm advocating for the 16-year go home because I'm her lawyer, but I know what happens in that home and that he still comes to that house. I got to find ways around that. But you guys are mandated reporters. And so some of the internal things that you guys must deal with when you're not just mandated reporting, but when you're getting information from clients or they're sharing things with you, building a relationship, and now you got to share that they relapsed, that they tested negative, and they trust you, things like that. Does anyone have any stories they want to share, or scenarios or circumstances that they want to share that they went through where they had to manage what was shared from a family or a client or something, that they kind of had an internal turmoil of, how do I proceed knowing that I got to disclose this, or how do I approach this?
Yeah, I can share one.
Oh, Caddy? Caddy, can you hear me? Am I saying it right? You're breaking up.
Yeah.
Okay, you're breaking up. So
am I breaking up? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Am I clear? Yeah. Just working with like clients who are clients, like younger clients come in, or minor, and if they like express like some form of harm, and then that is a time where I'm allowed to break confidentiality to a point. So when I call a parent and I say, hey, there is a high risk and I need you to get that child assessed, I need you to immediately take action, and the parent doesn't, there's just that space of, you can be charged with neglect. And so this can move forward in a very different way. and just having to maneuver that relationship, like not only with like my client and how you can proceed like with therapy, but also like what your life looks like with me and like the relationship with your parent after that.
Yeah.
So that's space for me.
That's huge. And I see the hands raised. Let me get to y'all. Thank you so much. But that is a huge points that you raised, because I got to keep working with y'all. So I'm sharing the thing that you're now having to be accountable for, that you shared with me. And now I'm coming back to your home to visit, see how things are going. You know what I mean? Like, that's the reality of it. How things going, everybody? How are y'all doing? How is Thanksgiving? And so that's the reality of it. And you got to work on rebuilding that bond. Like, that is definitely a challenge. I don't know, whoever wants to go first, Christina or Elizabeth. I didn't see whose hand was first. Whichever one of y'all want to jump in first.
I can go. So this is, I remember a case that I had. So I work at Covenant House, which is a shelter for young people that are experiencing homelessness. And this isn't a case that necessarily I had, but it was just a case that I heard about, where there was a young adult who had an HIV diagnosis and had HIV/AIDS, but they were reported to be sleeping with multiple individuals in the shelter. And it was a situation where we kind of was stuck between, okay, ethically, we can't just disclose the fact that this person has, you know, a diagnosis that may be detrimental to somebody's health because he is sleeping with multiple people in the shelter, versus making sure that everyone is protected and kept safe and kept healthy with the people that he is engaging sexually with. So I think what ended up happening was we ended up having a group with all the young ladies in the shelter, just to kind of make a generic life skill, like, hey, if you are, you know, sexually active, here's some of the health risk of it, and here's how you can keep yourself safe. And kind of really stress that when it came to the individuals who were engaging sexually with this young person. But in a case like that, you know, we talked about it for a long time, just because, you know, there was a lot of risk that was on the line, but there was also ethics that had to be considered.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a challenging one. Find bad cops in your work. Good cop, bad cop. Lawyers are usually bad cops. I'm okay with playing with it. I actually like it sometimes. But with defects workers, I know in particular, right? The caseworker would tell their attorney to SAG something, and their attorney would be like, I don't want the client to know. They'd be like, let me figure it out. And they'd find a way for it to come out and it wouldn't reflect badly on them, right? A bad cop in that situation, because that's battery. Like that's like having, every time you having sex with somebody in that way and you're not disclosing it, that's actually against the law, is to have counsel to show up and maybe join that meeting and say, not disclose, but add to that. In addition to, we want anyone to know that if you, any STD, like, so find ways to do your work too, where you may not necessarily be the bad cop. Your supervisor is one. I used to make my boss one all the time. My supervisor says, you know, so it's like, just, those are different ways to get around it. Christina, yes, ma'am. Thank you for sharing, Liz, though.
Yeah, so we have a student that is in an abusive relationship, and she's in 8th grade, and the family didn't know about it. So I think one of the interesting things with school counseling is the parents are sending their children to school for academics, but then they show up at our door with personal problems. Whereas when you are in social work, oftentimes you're aware that you are dealing with some type of traumatic incident. So I think it's a fine line, because when we have to call the parent to say, your child is being abused by her classmate, who's also her boyfriend, but the parent has no idea that their child is even in a relationship. It's so many layers that happens there. And even sitting with the counselor to make the decision of, we're going to call her mother, and her mother didn't answer, but we're going to wait another hour because we don't want to have to call the father, because that might cause harm to not only the daughter, but that might cause harm to the boy that also caused the harm to his daughter, because traditionally fathers are more protective in the sense of, now I'm going to go harm the person that has harmed my daughter. So it just becomes very layered. And, you know, we're dealing with pregnancy issues in school counseling, and the students haven't told their mom, or their parents don't even know that they're sexually active. So, it's just, like I said, it's a really big tug of war between like the parents' right to know something versus the child's right to come and tell us. So yeah, with school counseling and also with social work, like it can be very tricky, to someone's point, and just very layered. So
no, excellent points. It's definitely layered, right? And there's all these different avenues it could go down. You don't know if you make this call that you need to make, is this going to turn into that? So absolutely. Brittany, and then Brianna, and then I'm going to move on just for the sake of time. Or Brianna and Brittany, I don't know who was first.
But I think Brianna was first, so you can go ahead.
So I was at defect at one point, but now that I'm at the hospital, like there's a different protocol to like being a mandated reporter. And so when we get high risk screens, which are most of the time kids who try to commit suicide by doing ingestions, we have to go in and figure out what happened. And so when you talk about like the relationship on like telling the mom or, kind of making the report, recently we had a girl who came to the hospital who tried to commit suicide because of like family issues. But when the doctor went in to talk to her, of course, they couldn't disclose that information to mom, but they encouraged the daughter to talk to her mom about what happened. And so we didn't have to do a report just because like the mom had the proper protocols to like not for her child, basically. But I think it can be like kind of tricky to really figure out, should I say this or should I make this report? I guess when you're trying to figure out what information you should gather before even make a report as a mandated reporter.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And I want to encourage you guys to continue building relationships with your colleagues, maintain relationships with your professors, with, your stakeholders, because your supervisors, these are the people that you will want to check in with and talk to. And you don't even necessarily have to disclose the name or whatever, but just if you don't know, because these situations are not black and white, people are black and white. And so there's going to be times where we don't know, but we got to make a quick decision. And maybe our boss isn't answering the phone, or we don't trust our boss's judgment. We still need to check in with them though, because the buck's going to fall with somebody and it needs to be them. But, you want to be able to, if you need to get feedback, don't be afraid to ask. And then Brittany.
I was just gonna say to Christina's point earlier, and to your point earlier as well, it's like it can be very tricky because when you are a mandated reporter, whether you are, you aren't, whatever you do can affect like your client that you're working with. So sometimes being a mandated reporter, like it can be kind of tricky because especially since I work with kids. So I'll notice sometimes like if something goes on to where we'll have to report it or we'll have to have a separate conversation with the parents, the child will come back different. So like we'll have our instances with them in the session, but then the parent, whatever, however they may feel about whatever we may have said is now being taken out on the child at home. So like it gets kind of tricky of like, yes, I know I have to say something, but ultimately is me saying something making it worse. So what I've just found is, still making the report, but navigating the child through the report. So there are certain things that you can and can't tell to them about the report. Yes, but like letting them know like, okay, this is what I had to do as a result of your, mom or dad or somebody in the house not doing this. Is there like, do you think you'll be okay? Are you worried at all? Is there anything that you may need in this time? Because I know things may become difficult now that this is up in the air. So I appreciate both of your points. Like it is something that's very tricky because now you have to take a lot of things into consideration, like not just the before, the during, but the after also.
Yeah, and that's huge what you just said. And I do see your hand. Is it Leilani? I know Leilani. It's you have to take it talking with your clients, like communicating with them, bringing them up to speed on things so they don't feel when you can, so they don't feel totally out of the loop or blindsided. Saying things like, I may have to share this information, or I will have to. I like letting people know up front what I do and do have to share. As you're building a relationship, they always know you're going to be honest with them and let them know if you have to tell somebody, or why you might need to tell somebody, or why it's helpful for you to share with somebody, so that I can get you the help you need so we can get you out this spot, because I can't help you if you don't let me get that, right? And you don't want to stay here no more. So just talking with them is huge. So great point, Brittany, trying to walk, especially with children, because people don't think you need to talk to children, and they think you can talk at them, but children understand, especially our clients, because a lot of them have lived and experienced more than they ever should have. So a lot of them are a lot more mature than we realize. And this is the last one for the next slide. Yes, ma'am. Leilani.
I was just kind of go piggyback with, I think her name was Brittany, what she was saying about how the situation can kind of be tricky. I've been a mandated reporter for quite a while, since I've been like a camp counselor, assistant teacher and stuff like that, working with kids. But now it's different that I am actually like a victim's advocate now. And sitting like in the courtroom right now, I'm in the trial division, so I really don't deal with the kids. But however, in court, when we do have cases and we're looking at the calendars, and it is a crimes against children's case, I see how the attorneys just they use confidentiality by not disclosing the child's name or not disclosing the age, because in the courtroom there is multiple people who can hear the different crimes and see kind of like what's going on. But since I move into that division next semester, it's just kind of, I guess I'll have to alter what I know confidentiality to be, and like mandated reporting, because the child can tell you one thing, but in order to protect the case and to allow the judge to see all the facts by also protecting the child, it's kind of going to like be a little different.
Yeah, and I do want to specify, yeah, no, exactly. And I want to specify though, when I gave my example as what I can't share if my child client tells me, my role was different than what you'll be working with. They represent, prosecutors represent the state. They don't ever represent the victim. That's why your job is so important, because someone needs to be the voice of the victim. Because the prosecutor may sometimes need to do things to win their case that they not realize may negatively impact the victim, right? But in my role, I was the child's attorney. So attorney-client privilege attached to me because I was their attorney, like if they were an adult in a divorce case. So I had that confidentiality, but with the work that you're doing, even when you move into the children's unit, it'll look a little bit different than that. They will be able to disclose things that the child says, even if the child says, I don't want you to. So I did want to clarify that. So you didn't think I was on the line. I was just a little different. Kenya, I saw your point, but then I saw your face. Did you want to say something before I moved on to the next slide?
No, you got this.
Okay. So I'm going to skip some slides because we are skipping around. I do want to stop on this one just really quickly, just to remind you guys, because it sounds like a lot of y'all know the importance of documentation. Of course, documentation protects us as the worker, like that's the common one, right? CYA, like there's a whole little nickname for it. And it matters and it comes up. Especially in government work. And like I gave with the example with, was it Shaq? With DFACS, with all those cases she had, if she was telling somebody I got too many cases, that email that she sent is great. But it supports the clients and it supports the team in supporting the clients in the sense of, especially if you work with a team, you might get in a car accident, your caseload might switch, you might go on vacation, whatever it is, and your client was in the middle of something with you. And it could have been in the middle of a disclosure, or it could have been they had just disclosed or something. And if you have it all in here, which most of us have it in there anyway, and that's the only place it is, and they can't get in touch with you, your colleague who's filling in for you, or the new person that gets your caseload, has to start over and say, all right, so can you tell me again what your husband did to you? You re-traumatizing the hell out that person by having them tell the story over and over again, just because it was not, things weren't written down. The simple act of writing some of this stuff down can prevent you from having to put that person through that, having to tell that story over and over again, because they probably gonna have to keep telling other people. So it supports the team and supporting the client, but it also is helpful for the client. And then it's good with building relationships, because if you have these high caseloads, stuff's gonna start to blend sometimes, and you don't want to come in. You want to be able to skim your notes before you go in and see somebody, just to remember the last time you saw them might have been 3 months ago or 2 months ago, even 2 weeks ago, but you saw 10 other people after that with very similar circumstances. So you don't want to come in and being like, how are the kids? And they're like, I don't have kids, like, so it seems like it's only for the sake of CYA, but there are so many regular everyday instances where writing something down is like paramount in the work that we do. People want to be seen, they want to feel heard. And if you walk in and they feel like they remember what y'all talked about, because it was important to them. There's only one you, but we know there's a lot of them. But in their world, there's only one you and them. So when you show up and they have to repeat what they said the last 2 times they saw you, you're not listening to me. So why am I telling you what I'm going through? I'm shutting down. I got to go to work. We don't want that. And so write it down. Protects the organization in case there's the lawsuits. And then it prevents the duplication of efforts, because a lot of our work, not all of you guys on here, but I know a lot of us do work in teams. Or we work with multiple stakeholders. A lot of our clients aren't receiving just one service. Like, you might be homeless, but you might also have a mental health, diagnosis, and you might have mental health support, and you might also, have a child that is getting special services, that maybe is on the spectrum, and they have support. So we have a lot of people working. Luckily, happily, hopefully, they're getting a lot of services, right? You want to be able to document efforts and document things so that you're not doing the same thing that the provider that just left did. So that's also building relationships and working with stakeholders, so they're not like, didn't I just told such and y'all don't work together? I mean, we both work for DFACS, but I'm investigations and we're foster care. I know y'all been there before. And they're like, do y'all not talk? Because I'm annoyed and I got other people, so write it down and communicate with each other. Just the day-to-day seems so simple, but these things matter. All right, so I did cover criminal and civil in that first slide, so I'm not going to go into it as much, because I told Kenya I didn't think I was going to take the whole 2 hours, but it's looking like I might. Don't be laughing. Oh, I see you chuckling. So we talked about mandated reporting, and we talked about standard care laws are another sort of reporter law that you guys are familiar with. And it's where you just owe a particular duty to someone based on your level of service. Usually with therapists, if there's a relation and you're held to a certain standard with the court because of that relationship, right? And so you have to show these things. You have to show there was the professional relationship. You have to show they have the duty to respond. And you have to show that you showed up if you were sued as the professional in a reasonably prudent way, considering all these factors, right? And it's very state by state. But I wanted to get to, I wanted to get to this slide a little bit because we have so many mandated reporters. And I know everyone here doesn't work with children. So, thank you for your patience as we go into these areas. But some of it you might one day, so it might be important to hear. So you guys have already answered some of these questions if you've had to mandate actually make the report, right? But what's coming up recently are challenges against mandated reporting systems and how they negatively can impact impoverished communities, minorities, right? And so a lot of it is saying, a lot of the arguments against blanket mandated reporting or just being more cautious against it, and some people have arguments against mandated reporting in general, is, things like implicit bias might be present, racial inequalities, we're looking at statistics, cultural incompetency, people they're making these reports that know nothing about the individual and the community that they're coming from, the correlation between poverty and reporting, systemic racism, all these underlying things. And this picture points out some of the arguments. I don't know if you can see it, but it talks about the fact that sometimes, a lot of times, I don't know if you can see it, some people are over-reporting. Sometimes it says mandated reporting can undermine self-determination of people with disabilities. Like, there are a lot of little things that come up. And so when I started the work, mandated reporting, and the idea of it still to this day is very necessary. And it seems like, yeah, everybody should be a reporter, right? Yeah. And as you start to peel back layers, and like some of you guys have shared in your stories and experiences, you realize it's not always going to be that black and white. And once a family is in the system, they are all in the system. And it's very hard to just dip your, especially if you're a family of color. And I want to say that piece because I want to talk about, matter of fact, let me just go to the next slide. I probably can tell you, y'all, I told y'all how large my caseload was, and I told you how long, like usually over 100, varied between like 95 and 102. 11 years. I probably represented, and I'm being generous, 10 white children, white families. If we took the families, individual children, maybe like 16. That's a lot. That's a huge difference, because that means most of my caseload was Black, and I was in DeKalb, and DeKalb is not all Black. You know, we got Dunwoody, you know what I mean? DeKalb is huge, like DeKalb. So it always baffled me, because what I know is that abuse is not biased. Like, I know sexual abuse is happening in all communities. I know domestic violence is happening in all communities. I know homelessness, like I know all communities deal with these things. Why are our kids being the ones targeted, right? And so these are the conversations that are being had with regard to reporting. Again, I'm not against mandated reporting. I think it's, and I'm not against the system. Like some kids, and I think the system can actually help families. And I've seen parents thank us for giving them the help we need as we're giving the kids back. So I'm not against that, but I do think we need to be aware. We need to start having these conversations of how implicit and confirmation biases can come up, how lack of cultural awareness can come up in these instances and impact our families. You guys are aware of implicit unconscious bias. It's that negative attitude where we're not consciously aware of our beliefs against a specific group. So a lot of times when we talk about biases, we think about, I mean, I'm gonna keep it plainly, we think about people that aren't Black. But you know, a lot of y'all know we got biases. I've had a judge, I pissed her off like by my response, but she wanted to send my 5-year-old back to Mexico to parent to a dad who he never met, just because he was born to a mom here who was taken by immigration and he had nowhere to go. And she was like, well, we don't have no family here. Send him back to the family. We don't have nobody. We don't know this man. He don't know this man. We haven't looked at this home. Ain't no way. Like, why would you do that to him? Is it because he's Mexican? Is it because because that was her whole, and she was pissed and she got off the bench and all the things, but that was her bias showing up, you know, by treating him differently than she would a kid that was found on Candler Road, you know, a Black kid that she was used to dealing with. And so even we have biases that we don't realize show up by our own upbringing, right? It's important in the work that we do that we're aware of them. We're aware of what this looks like to have these uncomfortable conversations with our colleagues, to say, this sounds like you might be a bit biased, Your Honor. Things like that, so that they can become aware. And we want to make sure that we're showing up how we intend to show up. And those implicit biases can be so sneaky. And then there's the confirmation bias. That's that tendency to you think one thing is true. And so you only get your research from the place you think is true. Like I'm only gonna watch CNN, right? I'm only gonna watch Fox, right? Like, cause that's what the truth is. And that's what you're looking for. And if you think a certain population or a certain group moves this way, you know what I mean? Or you think your findings are what you think as an investigator, maybe you think what you your findings in the case are this, you're only going to look for research to support that, as opposed to looking at the big picture, because you might be wrong or there may be something else to this. And the decisions and the choices we make are impacting these people's lives. Like, that's the big thing about it. It's not me. It's not about me. I go home. So these decisions we make are huge. I want to show this little video. Oh, but I'm used to Teams. And I don't know how to do it in here. So if I just do share screen and I go to it.
Let me see. You'll share screen, and then at the corner, I want to make sure you hit the button to optimize sound.
The stop share.
Mm-hmm.
And then I need to pull the video
share,
up.
look at the bottom left, you'll see share sound.
Over here. Can you do it for me, or no, I gotta do it?
Sure. You want to send me the clip?
Yeah.
Drop it in the chat.
Thank you, Kenya.
Yeah.
As this is not my jam.
I think you're doing great, and I appreciate everybody for their engagement.
I do. You guys are such a great group. I feel like if we were in person, I'd be like, y'all want to go grab coffee after and keep the conversation going. I'm really enjoying just learning from you guys about your experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Can you hear I come? Okay. All right. And it's a short clip, like 5 minutes, I think, at most. All right, putting it in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. Did it show up? You got it?
Is this it? Can you see it? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can see it.
I can see it. Sorry, I was on mute.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Get ready for a healthier mind, body, and community. Uplift your week with Healthier Together, sponsored by Regents. Discover what you can do for yourself and those around you. Sunday mornings on Fox 13 Plus and Monday evenings on Fox 13.
Why did it stop?
I don't know.
Interviews regarding
Here we go.
The story. An official from
Can you start
DCYF
it from
told
the
me they
beginning?
cannot comment on cases.
I'm sorry.
Seattle Children's.
Yeah, I don't know why it started.
I didn't realize that. I got you.
It's so weird.
Abuse
when
a doctor took her from him.
Tonight, a local couple is
Thank you.
recounting the terror triggered by a doctor at Seattle Children's Hospital whose wrongful diagnosis of child abuse took their baby away from them.
Fox 13's A.G. Janival says Dr. Elena Fellman's findings were accepted by the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, but rejected by other doctors and the courts.
The judge in Grace and Sam Wilkinson's case ruled that DCYF deliberately refused to see Sam for who he is, a loving father and husband. Sam Wilkinson will always remember how he felt when he saw Sequoia for the first time after growing up adopted, never knowing his birth parents.
That was such a surreal moment for me because it was the very first moment that I laid eyes on my own blood.
And Sam can't forget that day, 7 months later, when a doctor took her from him and how he felt then.
I'm a person that believes that through most circumstances, life goes on. But the thought of not having my daughter doesn't really feel like life would go on.
Sam and his wife, Grace, lost custody of their daughter by being good parents. February 25th, they rushed Sequoia to an urgent care. When they saw she was holding her arm funny, they ordered an x-ray. It showed Sequoia actually had a fracture, and the family should go immediately to Seattle Children's Hospital because she needed surgery. But at Children's, everything changed.
We felt like criminals from the get-go just because of the nature of a 7-month-old having a fracture. It's not common. You could just tell that the whole dynamic changed.
The injury, because it was uncommon, was treated as evidence. One or both parents were responsible. It was a medical certainty.
That's really what it is that it was a diagnosis of child abuse, not just an accusation. They diagnosed our daughter with child abuse. I didn't know what the SCAN team was until we got an attorney.
SCAN stands for Safe Child and Adolescent Network. It's a team of pediatricians under contract with Washington's Department of Children, Youth, and Families who have special training to decide whether a child's injury is from abuse or neglect. The SCAN pediatrician handling Sequoia's case was Dr. Elena Feldman, and in her expert opinion, the x-rays showed at least 3 more broken bones besides Sequoia's elbow.
The doctor on the SCAN team, Elena Feldman, stated that these injuries were better understood as like child abuse injuries.
The situation felt hopeless, but Sam and Grace weren't helpless.
When we heard Elena Feldman, the name for the doctor, they decided they wanted to look her up.
It was there that we found your story on Casey.
Ready? Set?
In February, we brought you the story of Casey Sigmund and her baby boy Kane. Like the Wilkinsons, Casey had brought her son to Seattle Children's Hospital. And like the Wilkinsons, she was blindsided by the SCAN team's determination that Kane had a sure sign of abuse. Even the doctor who made the diagnosis was the same, Dr. Elena Feldman. The judge ruled Dr. Feldman had made a mistake. There were no signs of abuse or neglect, and Casey and Kane were reunited. Buoyed by Casey's story, Sam and Grace reached out to her for any advice she could give to turn their situation around.
And the next day, my mom got a message back, and Casey's like, you guys need to hire a lawyer.
Attorney Elena Treball was fresh from winning a child custody battle against DCYF when Sam and Grace hired her. Treball's first move was clear.
I wanted to ensure that we had a second opinion, time to figure out what exactly happened to Sequoia.
If DCYF had SCAN, the Wilkinsons had Dr. Naran Alajba.
You have a child abuse team, so you need a child abuse defense team.
Dr. Alajba is a practicing pediatrician with more than 2 decades of experience. She's also an instructor on staff at Seattle Children's Hospital, and for the past several years, she's been brought in to consult on alleged child abuse cases. After reviewing Sequoia's case, 3 things became clear. 1, neither Sam nor Grace hurt Sequoia.
2 weeks after the original person says there's a break, there should be a bright white thing happening here.
I don't see anything.
No, of course not. Here, same thing. Do you see anything? No, it all looks good.
We shared what we had found, which was that we believe Sequoia has marks of poor bone formation, which is a relatively common condition for newborn babies.
2, Dr. Feldman's diagnosis was done sight unseen.
We've learned not only through testimony, but also through, the SCAN team's own records, that they do not believe it is medically necessary to personally examine the patient prior to making their diagnoses.
And 3, the social workers back at the hospital had already decided who was to blame.
They asked me how Sam was in the house and his behavior and how he treated Sequoia and I. And so I could connect the dots of like, okay, now they're trying to pin this on Sam.
Misread x-rays, misjudged character that led to a mistaken diagnosis of abuse. But would the court agree? At the Wilkinsons' custody hearing, Judge Nicole Gaines Phelps reached the same conclusion. And she found the SCAN team made its decisions based on conscious and unconscious bias towards people that come from minority communities, particularly Black and brown communities.
They had no problem diagnosing child abuse, but then when it came time to explain why they made that diagnosis, they couldn't show up.
For a judge to use their position to call out and just name that it was racial bias. I was sitting next to him and we both just took a deep breath in that moment and just cried.
I reached out to officials from both Seattle Children's Hospital and DCYF for on-camera interviews regarding the story. An official from DCYF told me they not comment on cases. Seattle Children's request for an interview. Reporting in the studio, AJ Jandavel, Fox 13 News.
Okay. You got it.
I got it again.
Yeah.
Let me, it's not giving me an option to show my thing now.
At the bottom?
Show all windows. There we go.
Yeah.
Can y'all see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me go back to slideshow.
Yep.
All right. So what do I need to hit? So can y'all see the
I think it was the other option. What's the other option?
display settings?
Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. And so I wanted to show that, and I'm gonna be transparent with you guys. I felt a little uncomfortable watching it because I know people break babies. And so I want to be clear, there are broken baby cases, but we need to remember to really look at everything in all of our work, all sides, not just what the professional says it is, not just what we think it is. And I have the benefit of being trained as a litigator to try my cases from both angles so that I would try the whole defense's case so I could see stuff in advance. But you guys aren't lawyers, but try to think outside the box with your work too. You know what I mean? Just for yourself, so you could see different perspectives of what you might be faced with and dealing with. Don't just look at it through the lens that you immediately think, I know what this is. Because it sounds like with a little more research, I mean, first of all, with looking at the baby in person, like that's ridiculous. They could have actually avoided this child having to be without her parent for however long it was and traumatizing the child and the parents, right? We're talking about, we don't have time for that, but talking about, you know, the work that we do, and it's not just with children, it's with adults too, you know, elderly population, vulnerable populations, individuals with disabilities. Like these are populations that are prone to being abused and neglected, and people not listening to them, right? So this can go to them as well. So the reason we want to bring up the conversation about the way reporting impacts our communities, as opposed to white communities and communities in the majority, we want to make sure that the cases are being looked at carefully for what they are, but we also want to make sure we don't ignore that these things do happen. So we don't want to just push it aside either and say, you know, the doctor's white or something like that. You still want to examine it. Because I have had we call them broken baby cases, when someone broke the baby, hematoma to the brain, fractures, all the things, and like a 6-month-old, somebody broke the damn baby. And those were the cases I was up at night the most and most passionate about, reviewing medical records, Googling terms, all of that, because at the end of the day, you don't know who broke the baby. But babies go home if parents do everything they're supposed to do, and you gotta just sometimes pray that baby's gonna be okay when they go home. But yeah, anyway, that was my tangent. All right, so those are the hardest cases, my God. So I want to look at disparities in reporting, and of course I don't have it for Georgia, because we don't have that. But California's Child Welfare Indicators Project. So these are the disparities with the state of California. Out of 1,000 children, 108 allegations, there were 108 allegations with Black children, 88 allegations with Native American, 43 allegations of abuse and neglect, Latino communities, 35.1 white, 18.4 Pacific Islander, right? Again, if we know a real abuse and neglect actually does not discriminate, and we know that white families are dealing with it too, why is there 108 versus 35.1? And that's where those conversations come in, like, well, is this abuse and neglect? Are we looking at poverty? Was this report made because the worker came and they saw there wasn't a lot of food? Can we give them support and put things in place to put food in the home as opposed to snatching these kids out? You know, things like that, looking at what can be done so that our kids aren't negatively impacted in a different way, and asking these questions. And so for the sake of time, I am going to skip. I do have just, because I know everyone's not working with children. I'm going to really quickly, just questions that you can ask. You like, what is the developmental level of the child that you're dealing with that maybe made the allegation, but what's the developmental level of the parents? Something to consider as well, right? What's the culture? Something to consider. You dealing with refugees, things like that. Are they aware of things? You know, where is it neglect or is it unawareness? Like, right, lack of education. Did anyone provide an explanation? Story change. These are questions you just want to ask, not saying you still need to report if you're a mandated reporter, but these are questions you want to ask as you're working matters, as you're working cases with any population. All right, so making a shift for the sake of time, guys.
Turn right onto Wilcox Street, then turn left onto Winifred Street.
Oh, it's not. I was like, is that me? Okay. All right, so I want to talk briefly about self-awareness. It's vitally important in the work that we do because we're showing up. Like it's the us. It's about them, but we're showing up and we're all up in their stuff. And so self-awareness looks like knowing our strengths and limitations and not having an ego so big that you can't express your limitations and try to grow in those areas. If you know, knowing your, if you know that you are not, I'm not organized. So documentation was a challenge for me. I had a whole slide on it, right? I had to learn as I went and understand it. That's not my strong suit. I'm the people person. I'm gonna get down there. I'm gonna play with the kids in the daycare. Like that's my strong suit. I'm gonna get people talking. Knowing my limitations and knowing my strengths and being aware of that and doing the work, doing research, taking courses, things like that to strengthen your weaknesses in this work so we can show up as our best selves for our clients. Maintaining a healthy and appropriate boundaries. That can be challenging in this work because we get attached. And they get attached. So just knowing outside of what the standards say, when you're getting maybe too attached to a case or a matter, being okay giving it to someone else if it's getting to be too much for you, because you're too attached in the outcomes. You're too attached to your client that keeps relapsing and it's impacting you because you're so invested in this one client, you can't focus on your other clients, and you just knew she wasn't going to relapse in this one time, and she did. And it's just, you know, kind of talking to your boss, maybe I need to give this case to somebody else. Maybe I'm too close to it. That doesn't make you a bad worker. It makes you a whole human. What makes you a bad worker is recognizing that and staying in it. And not asking for help. That's when the bad worker starts to shift. Not bad, like, you know what I mean? But like, you want to be able to communicate and recognize those things. Knowing your own triggers, that's huge. Knowing yourself, knowing that if you grew up in a home with domestic violence where there was yelling and fighting all the time, and you were exposed to it or you experienced it yourself, and maybe you want to work with that population to give back, knowing that you need to have a therapist or consider having someone on your own team to help you navigate when you're triggered so that the work doesn't become too much for you, and being able to walk away if you need to. I had a colleague that was molested by her father. And by the time she came to work with us at Child Advocacy Center, her and her father had gotten through it and they were in better relationship. And she worked with us for 2 years before she felt, because before she said, I can't do this anymore. Because it's impacting my health, it's impacting my marriage, I'm going home depressed, it's bringing up things in me that I thought I had dealt with and I thought I could work with this population. So she went to work with the elderly population. It was burning her out way quicker and it was impacting her. And she needed to be able to take care of herself. Knowing your own triggers and not being afraid to recognize that, not seeing it as a failure if you always thought you wanted to work with this population because you went through it or your sister went through it or whatever. And then you're like, oh, I'm in it now and I don't know that this is the way I can do this. Not right now. Not being afraid to ask for help. Practicing empathy. Somebody talked about that. Empathy with your others, but empathy with yourself. In that example I just gave, empathy with yourself is saying, I can't do this anymore. It is hurting me. Helping them is hurting me. And being okay with that. We talked about implicit biases. We talked about the challenges of them. All right. Looking at time, Kenny, I'm looking at time. Got 2 minutes.
Okay.
Really quickly, burnout, guys. Burnout is real, and I'm sorry that this is the last thing. Burnout, compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, all of it is very real because we are on the front lines of people going through some really traumatic experiences, and they're in crises. And if you're doing the work, you're connected to them. And so being aware of the fact that compassion fatigue, hearing the story of what your client just went through, hearing about somebody that might have just been molested or physically abused or might, whatever they're dealing with, was raped, whatever they're dealing with, that can lead to compassion fatigue, just hearing that and taking that on. And then hearing it from multiple clients over and over again, or dealing with that one case and reading those facts over and over again, that can lead to burnout. And then we don't show up as our best selves because we're burnt out, but we're so committed to the work. And we did all this. We got our license, we went to school, we got our master's, we got our doctorate. Like, I put a lot into this. I'm built for this work. God put me here for it. I'm not walking away. But you are like struggling. It's going to impact not just you and your family and your home life. It's going to impact the client because you're not giving them your best. So the very thing you went to school to do, you're not able to do. And you're making mistakes and you're messing up. And it's impacting everything. So we have to recognize when burnout is starting to show up. We owe it to our clients and we owe it to ourselves. It could look like being emotionally and mentally exhausted, being cynical, being depressed, easily overwhelmed, you're impatient. Things that you loved about your job, you just randomly hate anymore. You hate them. You've got to be able to do that. And you've got to be able to look for ways to combat that with the self-care. Maybe that's the yoga, maybe that's church and your faith, whatever that is, the mosque, whatever your faith is. Maybe that's talking to friends, a therapist, counseling. Therapists have therapists. But you got to be able to take care of yourself because we're taking care of everybody else. So am I done? I'm done, 11:30. I was trying not to go over, keep you guys on this beautiful Saturday morning. Thank y'all so much. I'll go to the thank you slide.
So a couple of people have asked for a copy of the slides. So will you be kind enough to share those? They said that they are applicable to the work they do.
To Miss Campbell, right? Is that what that was?
Yeah, that would be perfect. We thank you so much for sharing. Did anybody have a question or a comment for Esquire Lynch?
Thank y'all so much for all you do. And thank y'all for engaging and talking, because I learned from you.
Absolutely.
You learned from me. So thank you guys for sharing your stories and
So
experiences.
something they may be processing, but I just wanted to give a couple of takeaways. One was like just knowing your connections. Like, I think it's so cool how Danielle and I met. And so she calls me Kenya. So I can say for me, I usually could tell where I meet people based off of what they say. So if I'm somewhere and somebody says Dr. Jones, I'm like, uh-oh. Like, because I know that means I met you within the CAU platform versus in other places. So I just think it's always cool to where you are right now, that these are your colleagues. These are going to be your resources, your connections as you move forward. And so I appreciate having these opportunities where you can have personal and professional connections where you intertwine. So I really do thank you, Danielle, for coming and sharing about everything, as well as I appreciate you working within this time of your loss. And so I think that that's always important because life keeps happening and people still have things that happen. And so I didn't want to not have that be acknowledged, because I think that is something that does happen a lot. Then the other thing I wanted to share with you all, and I see Nelson has his hand up, is I don't know how much you all are connected to this social media or life, but Keke Palmer's story, right? Is that not like a perfect opportunity to see the work of helping professionals when you're looking at social workers, counselors, lawyers? Like, my heart goes out to all of them. As Danielle first mentioned, with domestic violence, I find such a strength in that she came forward, because most people, they don't come forward until it's really a horrific incident. And so I really have to applaud her for making she stepped up. And then I also felt like there's a need for some patience or grace for this young man, because, I feel for him. that you really are in a place where you think you need to put your hands on somebody. And then they've got an 8-month-old. Like, this child isn't even walking yet. So when I see you all, I find this to be like such a perfect opportunity for you all to see the work and the value of the work that you're doing in all aspects. Because in that particular case, I'm just looking at it like, dang, you know, who would have thought that she's probably going to want some counseling? She's probably going to need some supports in some way, shape, or form. And then we have Danielle coming. There's this whole piece about legal. And so I just saw that as such an opportunity for us to really just acknowledge that we are needed and we're valued. And so I just wanted to add that piece. What were you gonna, you had a question, Mr. Nelson? Yeah.
So first I wanted to say thank you to I call lawyers doctors because they have the Juris Doctorate. So I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Lynch for the presentation today. And I wanted to also say thank you for bringing our demographic forward regarding ethics and also regarding burnout and also regarding statistics, because I know we see so many other, I know I see on my social media so many other races, even Hispanic therapists speaking out and talking about burnout and talking about ethics, but I don't see so many of me. I don't see so many Black male therapists, Black Puerto Rican male therapists at that. And so what you helped me to do was to identify so that I can share, just make it as showing up as myself. I do struggle with showing up as myself sometimes because a little bit of myself has some rough edge to it. And I'm learning maybe that's what I need to bring. And not necessarily rough edge like Nelson personal Facebook rough edge, but rough edge as in somebody else's rough edge, they're uncomfortable with theirs. And that's their approach to things. And in our community, in our melanin, we have that amplification naturally. So thank you so much for, I look at Clark Atlanta as Black excellence. And so I thank you for representing Black excellence as an alum and in this presentation today.
Well, thank you so much for your words. And I do want to say, show up as yourself. Show up as your best self, right? But you're made this way. There's only one you. And you're in, like, I'm a very purposeful person. Like, God put us here for a purpose. Like, that's the way I move. And so even with my clients, when I teach yoga, I don't know if you know this, Kenya, I pray before I teach. Like, it's whatever you have that makes you, that's what your client needs. In addition to the education and the layers, but anybody can bring that, but you were assigned this case for a reason. So show up as you. I'm excited about that too. Yeah. But yeah, okay. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful Saturday. I think that's it.
You too. For us, we've had 3 of our interprofessional learning communities, so I truly appreciate you all. I hope that you all have a good closing out of your semester. And we had yoga this session. So did you have any final thoughts or any comments that you wanted to share, Ms. Campbell, before we close out?
Just if you have not turned in your reflections from last week, please get those in ASAP. I got your email, Ms. Campbell. Gotcha.
Okay. So I just thank you all for the work you do. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Was somebody going to say something?
Yes, this is the last one for the semester.
Now, I think Ms. Campbell is going to send out a poll, because if you want to have like a casual like meet and greet, we definitely would love to host you for something like that. But we also recognize that you all have finals and papers and things to that extent. So we kind of want to move in the best way that serves you all. And so if you all want to meet and greet, we want to meet and greet too. We do not have a requirement for that, because you have your reflection paper for this. And then, we'll be up and running in January, so you can't quit us just yet. So, yeah, but I mean, I think, you got 3 interprofessional learning communities. So you just had this closeout with ethics, and I feel like they've kind of built on each other. That session with Mr. Johnson last month was truly impactful. And I feel like even with Professor Lynch mentioning that implicit and explicit bias, I mean, those were some of the things that he raised with that Black maternal health. And then remember Dr. Shell, he introduced us to the need for these interprofessional collaborations and communities. So that's why for me with the Keke Palmer thing, I was just like, whoa, like this really does kind of capture everything. And this is like a celebrity, for lack of better words. So I just can imagine the things that we all are, encountering in our day to day. And then that's why I even shared with Danielle, life is lifing, all the while you're doing all these other things. So we want to just kind of keep all of that in mind. So yeah, did you all have any questions for us before we close out? Because we're definitely here. Oh,
just a huge thank you for this space. The last session, this session, the first session, I use Dr. Shell's Me Search from the first session all the time.
Right.
Second session was extremely personal for me. Like I'm trying to figure out the words for that right now. And this session was just very, 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 very good because we know about implicit bias. But that court case in Seattle definitely kind of woke me up, because even in working with defects, I don't have a natural implicit bias. But when you see a baby with a broken bone, you're like, what's going on here?
That's right.
So that was a really good one to kind of teeter on the edge in between the two. So yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Because you have to decide where you're going to advocate, right? Because you see the baby with the broken bone, your first thought is I'm advocating for this baby, not realizing like, I don't want to come into this with a bias, and recognize like these parents can be, biased against for certain reasons. So yeah, I think that was a good example. So I appreciate y'all for showing up, being engaged, doing those reflection papers, submitting out those forms. Professor, well, she's going to be a professor eventually. Naya Parson Hudson, she's our intern, as well as Ms. Campbell. They'll be working with you all. We're working on our newsletter. Dr. Giddens and I are doing presentations on the work that we do with you all. So don't think that anything we're doing isn't intentional. When you all share these reflection papers, if y'all are interested in doing research or presentations, we would love it. I mean, if you want to do a reflection paper, or if you're interested in doing a presentation, that's one of the 5 goals that we have within the program and the grant, is to actually be able to disseminate the work that we do. So if there's a way that this is aligning, or you feel like it's another way that it could align with the work that you're doing in your practicum, reach out to Ms. Campbell and or myself, because we want to be as involved as possible. We want you to really find this to resonate. We don't want to just have you up on a Saturday morning. I know it's about the stipend. I know the stipend is important, but we want it to show up in your work. We want you to be able to really stand out and be beside your other scholars and be able to show them like, hey, have you thought about this? Or have you considered this? So not even coming from a place of judgment, but coming from a place of like query, coming from a place of quandary, coming from a place of like considerations that we now know that are more beneficial. So yeah. And then shout out to Miss, I think it's Miss Marshall. Let me see if I can get her name right. She out here doing a 5K, y'all. I don't even know how to walk and talk at the same time. I don't think she's still on here. But yeah, she said she had to do a 5K this morning, all while on the ILC. So she was like, what? So I appreciate y'all for showing up in the way that you show up. Okay. So that's it for me. Unless you have any questions for us, you can always send Ms. Campbell or myself an email, or Dr. Giddens. She's a multitasker, so she had another meeting, but she's definitely here for you all as well. So we appreciate all that you do. We want you all to, Ms. Campbell, she'll follow up with an email with you all as far as like with the evaluation for this, the reflection paper, and she'll probably send out a poll if you all are interested in doing a meet and greet. We'd love to. And we take ideas. So if you got like a place that you want us to meet and greet at, I can cover chips and salsa, no margaritas. Okay. All right. Y'all have a good one, okay?
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
See you. Oh.